brokers, and dispatchers. You're tuned into the E-Carrier Check channel, where we bring you the insider tips, tricks, and insights to drive your sales and logistics business to new heights. Each week, your hosts, Jared and Nate, sit down with the top professionals in the industry, diving deep into everything from prospecting and cold calling to maintaining carrier relationships and maximizing your bottom line. Learn real-world strategies, hear success stories, and get actionable advice you can implement in your business today. So buckle up and get ready for an entertaining and informative ride. This is the E-Carrier Check channel, your source for can't-miss logistics intelligence. Stay tuned.
Hello and good morning. Happy Wednesday and welcome back to the E-Carry Check channel with your hosts Jared and Nate. I'm excited to be back today. We took a little week off last week. There's a bug going around, but Hey, we're back and I'm excited to kind of just touch base with our community. Super excited to touch base again with Nick Klingensmith. This guy is the man, the myth, the legend. I'm excited to hear what he's got to say today. Before we jump into what we're talking about today, Nick, so glad to have you back, man. How have you been? What's new with you?
Guys, thanks again for having me. This is always one of the highlights of my week when we get together. And I'm just a geek for this topic. I think you know that. Life's good. I mean, I told you I got a bit of a plumbing issue, which seems to be a common theme in my life this past year or so. But we're working around the obstacles and just finished up my Spartan racing season this weekend. Despite being injured with what I have referred to as triple homicide elbow, also known as golfer's elbow. Why do the worst injuries have the lamest names, right? So anyway, to finish strong, I actually completed the Beast obstacle course, the half marathon distance on Saturday with 0 obstacle fails. So good. I'm coming into the week riding a high, man.
Good, man. Good.
I freaking love that.
I do love
that.
Recently, you just put out this awesome book, Selling Inspired. Maybe tell us a little bit about that as well, if you could. Just give us a brief rundown.
Absolutely. Selling Inspired is not a sales book. It's a book for salespeople. It's a book on sales motivation. It's a book on mindset. Yeah. And even though it's a short book with short chapters, I share through personal stories and experiences, whether it be obstacle course racing, overcoming my personal adversity, whether it be cancer, alcoholism, and of course, my time and my career in sales and logistics. And it's about personal growth and development so that we can ultimately have the mental endurance to withstand the rigors of a career in logistics. We think, we talk about the day-to-day. Oh, you got to be tough in this industry, right? That's because of the day-to-day bullshit. Yeah. But that's not why how many brokers right now in this business are going to go out and they'll be mortgage brokers by the end of the year, right? Like this isn't an easy job. And especially right now, compared to say 10 years ago, I spent 14 years at one company. Some kid right now starting his career will never know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. You've got people having to change jobs every 18 to 36 months. That's what it's going to be like for them. And that takes mental endurance too. It takes letting go of expectations, taking personal responsibility for your circumstances and situation, but also not selling yourself short. Not taking circumstances as excuses for not being our best selves.
God, I love that.
I do too.
Nick, we're talking about differentiating today in sales, and I think this is probably one of my favorite topics because there are so many brokers out there. There's so many carriers out there, and just picking up the phone. It's a start. A lot of people just don't even do that, but starting to talk about differentiators and people don't even realize, that personality isn't going to be the only thing that gets you in that game. And I'm excited for this topic because I think this is something that you do wildly well. just in the way you brand yourself, in the way you talk, in the way you communicate. Let's dive into this topic and really get into differentiating from the top level. How do you envision this differentiating yourself going into 2025?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the year because it does matter. I used to be able to just teach class on this. Literally, I gave one of my speeches back at Blue Grace on this particular topic, but what I said then wouldn't be as relevant now because what's happened, right? The market is significantly fragmented. And I mean by the brokers and the brokerages. I grew up in what's now a pretty big place. Nowadays, the flag you fly under is probably unknown. How many people are individuals? How many people work for a small shop or under their own brand working for somebody else? And so part of the problem that I think we're facing is also you're going to have people who, man, I'm going to call myself a humble guy, but at the same time, I know I've got a pretty healthy ego on my shoulders. So, and it's about towing that line. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with because identifying your value is what most people fail to do in the first place. And if they can't identify their value, then they're going to fail to communicate their value. And part of the reason they fail to communicate it, though, is because of imposter syndrome. Because I used to fly under somebody else's flag and it was real easy to sell their service with gusto. But now that I'm selling myself, we start to say, ooh, I don't want to be a salesperson. Ooh, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be this. I don't want to do that. And instead we just make our sales calls with incomprehensible dribble because we're not even sure what it is that we do. Not setting the stage. That's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you hit it on the head with the way that a lot of people just don't understand that it's amazing. Like I try to grasp the words what to say here, but people they know what to do. They just struggle putting it into action, and honestly, like I know I need to eat better. I know I need to go work out, but putting the thought into action is really honestly probably one of the more harder things to do. And this is why I like talking to you, Nick, because you give us those ideas, those thoughts on where to go.
Ironically, and this is something, so anytime we are going to talk, I sit down for about 30 minutes with my journal and I just write on the topic. And so there's a lot of incomprehensible dribble in here, but there's some good thoughts too. And so, because I was trying to think of myself, right? Using myself as an example, because I am an example. When I was selling Blue Grace or Sheer or even like someone else, or as a consultant even, I had no problem selling what I was doing. But now that I'm a speaker, now that I'm a coach, right, I have to sell myself, which means to a certain degree, I have to beat my chest. Imagine if you were getting surgery on something today and the doc walks in, he's like, hey, guess what? You're my first. Is that what you want to know? And not for nothing. Not only will nobody buy from you, but you're going to act the way that you behave. So I'm not talking about a fake it till you make it. I think that's bullshit. I think what we need to do is find out what you know you're good at. Find out what is the thing that you can actually do and provide different. And what that really comes down to is this. Because you know what? I bet if there's 100 people listening right now, 80 of them just said, well, I have capacity, or me, or I have a small team, or I have a big team. We only work with 5 carriers. We work with 1,000. We have the best tech. We don't have any tech. We're all bullshit. None of that matters. All right. What you think matters is irrelevant. It's what does the customer need? And what that means is this: what is the specific problem that you can solve? Number one, is it a problem that only you can solve? And if not, how are you or why are you the best person to solve it? And that's what you have to drill down to. And it comes down to niching down. You guys have talked about this a lot on here. It's something that I had to adapt to, because when I was leading a team of like 90 people, I had to come up with a process that would work for most of the team. I had to work based on how the resources that we had were going to be able to, it was a supply chain basically of personnel, right? When you're working with 3 or 4 people, that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to be all things to all people. Even if you work at one of these places, when you call someone up and say, hey, we do everything, you've lost them right off the bat. There's no differentiator, no value proposition. You are every phone call they've ever had. but they have a problem. They actually have a need. So I figured I could literally take the whole stage on this. I'll pause for a second.
Wow, let's go. Let's keep it cooking, man. I love hearing your thoughts here.
I think
All right, well, let me go back to this for a second. Then when it comes down to the value proposition, right? When you actually identify what that thing is that you can do different and better than other people, you have a responsibility. You have an obligation then to share that. That's how we get over the imposter syndrome. So you mentioned it a minute ago, and it's something that I wrote down. Something, me specifically, I'm an expert at breaking down ideas into tangible objectives and then taking decisive action towards them.
Say that again.
I am an expert in breaking down ideas into tangible objectives and taking decisive action towards them. And so get this, though. That's what I sell. On my website, when I said I came up with my own value proposition, my benefit statement is this, is that I help logistics sales professionals who feel lost, stuck, or unmotivated to clarify their priorities, align their goals, and then break them down into the wildly specific and stupidly simple action steps that drive success. Now, it says who I help, how I help them, specifically, and what they can expect. Guys, I do lots of other things. But that's what I do best and different than other people. So that's what I sell and who I sell to. I have clients in the insurance business. I've spoken at schools, right? Like, so, but that's the value proposition. That's the conversation starter. There's a guy, who I network with. And when I asked him what he's best at, guys, he gave me a specific lane. One lane, and he tells me that's where he fishes and hunts. And what's genius about that, and I'm going to make up a lane here, like New Mexico, somewhere, this is how you can tell I'm not in the game anymore. Somewhere in New Mexico to Atlanta, once he nails that down, the people in New Mexico ship other places too. But he opens the door by saying, hi, I specialize in this lane. I'm looking for people who do it. And then if they say no, cool. That's the other thing. Once you identify these different levers, right? Like instead of saying I do everything, break them down to the really specific and make them specific, unique offerings. It gives you 10 different phone calls to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really quick. I don't want to cut you off because we're on a heater right now, but I just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank everyone for being here. Tire Killer, T. Harris, Chief Freight Hauler, Freight Master Resource. RJ, you want me to type in what Nick said? I'll have to rewatch it. I mean, he brought the house right there on that liner, that one liner. So I'll shoot you an email with that. Tire Killer, thanks for being here, man.
Can you put that one back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tire Killer, happy to talk offline on this one, but I disagree. And let's break this down. Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please.
Because
we love the carrier.
This is where I think a lot of drivers do fail to understand because, and I'm just going to make a broad statement here. So love or hate me, whatever. Okay. But the fact that you have a CDL don't mean shit because the customer is unaware. They don't care. They don't know that part. Right. So we have to think about what do they want different? Like as far as they know, they can get a truck. So it's not the fact that the driver is a driver. That's not a differentiator. It's not a value proposition to anybody in the world except the broker. Yeah. So what do you really control? You control information. You control communication. You control the rates. You control you control those aspects or can control directly for it, which are what people want. The reason people try to use brokerages, at least the larger companies will try to use them, is so they can engage in their technology and so they can get the visibility. And nowadays they have all these different requirements. So from a driving perspective, it's, and I'm just trying to think of the line here. And of course I would have to know who your target is because it first matters is like, if I benefit one section of the company, but it's like of the country, but I can't make any money doing that, then I'm not going to be in business very long. So we have to hunt the people that we're going to be able to help and the people that are going to use us and pay us money to do it. So identify what it is that you can do better than other people, and then identify the market who will benefit from that the most, and then communicate it. It's not that it's new, but I'll tell you what, the competition is not doing this. They are not communicating their value in a way. So to the consumer, to the prospect, it is new. If any of that helps, I saw that and I was like, oh, wait, hold on. There are ways to do this for sure. Also, you have to understand your target market and your big segment isn't everybody. It's to identify Here's what I wrote this down. Niching down. Focus on being the best at solving one problem for one person.
I like that.
I do too.
I didn't know if you had anything more to add to that, but I'm also I just love Nick. He just goes off, man.
I'll tell you something. You know what you guys are bringing value for me, and you bring value for a lot of people. Is like, if I needed to get connected to almost anybody in this business, you guys are one of the first people I'm going to reach out to.
I appreciate it.
And you know what? If I was a shipper, if I was someone else, like the answer to that is the same. And I'm going to, like, somebody who's been working at one place for 4 years doesn't have this, but some of the more tenured vets who have been around the block a little bit, they got to stop looking at their history like a resume.
Yeah.
And start thinking of it like, this is my experience. And who are the people, who are the places, the things I've took with me? I do have something that is different than other people. I don't have to know everything. If I have resources, I can connect to other people. I have value beyond connection between you and a truck, and then sell that, because people will buy that. And once they buy that, you can sell them everything else.
Yeah. I think something that's interesting, Nick, that you said is, and honestly, like, you look at 2025 and I feel like people are really, Tyler Killer kind of said this, unfortunately, people lack the ability to take responsibility, and then Tyler Killer says something earlier again. He's like, people don't take, what else did he say up here somewhere? He said something else. Work ethic has gone downhill. And honestly, like, the other night I was talking to my son, and, I said, basketball season's coming up. And I said, what are your thoughts on this? Because I said, you have these uphill dreams, but you've got downhill habits. And I said, you've got to find a way to change that accountability for yourself and start to move up the ladder here and start to practice and you can't just sit on your phone. You can't just watch, playing 2K. I know 2K will teach you stuff. But it's one of those things where I think if people can get good at communicating in 2025, that alone is a differentiator, because people are really struggling. I read this thing this morning, and I thought it was kind of funny that adults are going down in literacy and English and all this. And I was like, okay, people that can communicate and differentiate themselves.
Chat speak.
It's honestly, everyone is like becoming like this. I remember when a calculator came out and my dad was pissed off. And my dad was like, you won't be able to do arithmetic. Nobody calls it arithmetic. I was like, what do we do? You're so old. What are you talking about? I'm like, I need a friggin', a calculator. And he's like, your brain will go to mush. Well, now we got, this Chat GPT functionality, and you could just take a picture of your homework and it'll do it for you. I've seen it happen. And so I think this is such an interesting subject for the drivers. It is definitely one of those things that you control the communication. You can control how you push those clients and what you do and how you do it. There's so many other ways of differentiating yourself when it comes to drivers and or brokers. And I love this subject because people need to look at what 2025 is going to bring and how you can start to be. I honestly look at all of this and I'm like, God, people just suck at communicating.
Well, I think
another thing I'm sorry, Nate, go ahead.
No, I was just saying a lot of it, what I've seen, it's some people just get, quickly shut down if they don't know an answer or something. Like they think they should know everything. Like I think you should show you're vulnerable and ask those questions. Yeah.
Guys, not for nothing, that is my differentiator. People don't hire me for my rah-rah. It's here's all the things I screwed up. And here's how I literally told somebody that in a message today. Here's everything I messed up and how not to do it.
Yeah.
And now the 2025 thing is interesting, and this is also going to hit the people who don't want it to be about them, but personal branding is a thing now. And especially, it's one thing if you are working for a big box place, right, and you're flying under their flag, that's fine because that's what they're going to see and that's what they're going to know. But you have to be a real human being. In the age of AI, you have to show you're a person, and that means like posting. And not just reposting. And what I call, and this is something I work with the people I'm coaching on, because I'm not like the algorithm expert or anything like that, but I say people are going to look at your page and they're going to look at the activity box, the first 3 posts. And if you just repost your company's content 3 times, you're either not a real human being or they're moving on. Like, no, you don't always have to post one of those, hey, here's a picture of a squirrel and what it taught me about sales pictures, like, or your family, but you know what? Just make something that's legit. You have an interest, give an opinion on something. Just let people know you're a person of some kind.
Yeah.
I'm lucky, man, because I got a lot of strings I can pull on, like between just the different things that I do. There's a lot of, and the writing, I'm lucky to have content for days. And I know it's not always that easy, but one of the guys that I'm coaching, I was like, dude, you like hockey? Just put a post out about hockey. And he did. It got a lot of engagement, from like-minded people, and it was good stuff. So you don't have to overload it. I'm posting 3-4 times a day, a couple times a week, just so when someone looks at your in your real thing there, they see that you're a real person. You have a thought, you have an opinion. Also understanding that it should be clear where you work and what you do. People, they're only going to look once. There's no shadow games here. That's also like when I said I had to come up with my own value proposition. I don't even know if you guys knew what I did. Right? Like up for the last year, it's just been sort of, here's all the mindset stuff. But at some point, if you want to sell people, you have to tell them what you can do for them.
Yeah. This is kind of really good timing. Bella, there's a post that you had put out, it was a couple of weeks ago. We actually used it as an example for a person that we were trying to help. But just putting out that value, Bella, you're doing a lot of good things out there. I'm really glad that you're posting because
oh my gosh,
it's helping. And we're sharing your posts, trying to give people really good ideas on how to just post on LinkedIn or just trying to add value. I love your content, Bella.
Yeah, I agree.
It's one of those things too, where your job is the effort. Your job isn't to read it. I've made like a baller video before where I was like, oh, dude, this is going to break out. And it had like 3 views total on all my channels. It's just the way, like, okay. And then this random one I almost didn't make got 60,000 views on TikTok. Jesus. This one on Facebook where people were just John at me got 1 million. Like, you just don't, like, it's just if you have it, just put it out there. It's for those who need to find it or those who need to see it.
I agree. Chief Red Holler, no, you're not the last carrier, brother.
Yeah, it's definitely a platform that helps. It'll help with where you post your stuff and your content. Because YouTube, you just can't post. I know he's on YouTube all the time. I don't know how much he's on Facebook, but definitely, I would take the time to put it on LinkedIn. And like Nick said, take a picture of your load, take a picture of your new friggin' hazmat friggin' certification, all that aspects. Those are things that I'd post on.
Yeah, and I bet carriers have the most content out there if you think about it, because they're traveling, they're talking to other carriers on the road and talking with hundreds of freight brokers throughout the month. So I can imagine the content they could have.
What Harris said isn't wrong either. And one thing I like about Cleary Show Domiciled is that they're getting the drivers on there, and he's getting better at getting some of the stories out behind. But I mean, or was it I think it was on the lounge where they had the guys from like the truck parking club or something, and who was on there, Jamie Anderson, I think, or somebody was talking about. You don't think about these guys have to park their truck, and there might not be a bathroom for 2 hours away for them or something like that. Like, I think it's all right for a truck driver to share some of the story on social media. It doesn't have to be a main part of what you do, and I don't know where they hang out. Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn somewhere? Will it get you business? I don't know, but will it hurt you? Maybe, probably not. But know that you exist, especially in the day of like all the fake double broker AI, whatever, like just show you're a real person.
What I'm more of a fan of when it comes to social aspects of things is just the community. I love the relationships that have come from building this channel. I think that's probably been my favorite thing. We've met some incredible people that have literally changed our lives, that have become very dear friends. And that's what I like about it. So, just being a part of something that's bigger than you is, I wonder what everyone's doing. The loneliness in this world is real, and drivers are probably more susceptible. And the first people that actually worked from home, which is just their truck, and it was one of those things where, drivers need to communicate. Drivers need to have somebody in their lives. And so that's why I love all the drivers that come here. because we hear their voice, we hear them, we see what they do, we encourage them, and I think it's important to be a part of other social communities. So those are just my thoughts on that. Nick, back to the differentiators, and this is kind of an interesting thought of, differentiating yourself on the front end is a very interesting, you have to do it, right? But I think one of my favorite parades I've ever been to, that I had an opportunity. I went to a parade in Boston when I was there, and they actually had, the guy had the front end of a VW Bug.
Love you, brother.
But the back end was a trike bicycle. And when I think about that situation, the front end was really important, but I thought the back end was probably one of the more interesting things I've ever seen. I've never seen a trike that had a VW Bug on the front of it. And I was like, okay, when it comes to sales, the front end of just differentiating yourself and being that kind of that spear that goes into the sale. But how do you differentiate yourself on the back end of follow-up, on the back end of selling, because that's where all the money's at. That's where all of the wins happen. You don't happen to win on the front end as much anymore. You win on that follow-up. You win on that chase. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what does differentiating look like when it comes to 2025 and the back end of follow-up.
I'm going to give an old example that I think would be relevant now, because it was something that was interesting to me. And ever since I did this, I started doing this. Back working for a DHL reseller. When I asked, and I'm going to make up a little bit here, I don't remember the very details. We're just talking about like 2008 or something. But when I had asked them, like upon closing and them saying, hey, we're going to use your business, I'm like, why did you buy from me? Right. And they were like, oh, because we like the system better and the automation, and it was going to allow us to process our labels faster. All right, cool. I stopped by about 6 months later and I was like, hey, how things going? Great, blah, blah, blah. Any issues? Yada, yada. And I was like, hey, let me ask you something. Why'd you guys buy from me? And they gave me a different answer. This time it was about because of the way the trucks showed up. It was one truck versus the two, like FedEx had two, And so what I sort of learned from here is the customer's relationship with your company and service evolves as their needs develop as well. And so by asking that question, I learned unique little ways, what I'm calling lures here. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second, of things that people want to buy. People will buy the very specific thing if it's the very specific thing that they need. And when we talk about differentiators in this day and age too, where we have 250 characters or 7 seconds to get somebody else's attention, right? The fishing lures, we have to focus on getting in the door, but it's not flash. All right. They're things that you provide. They're part of the back end. So, it's one of the spokes of the trike. All right. And so our lures are made of one of those. So whether it be, and something I wrote down here where people talked about their differentiators and I lost it, but they're going to talk about their, oh, we have capacity. That's not a differentiator. Everybody can get trucks, we have relationships, like, great. So does everybody else, like, hey, we have a big team. We have a small team. All these things don't matter without knowing it. But here's the X factor though, that most people, and I guarantee you, if we asked 100 sales reps on here right now, I would bet you my plumbing issue that 5 of them won't say yes to this question. But how many people go hunting for problems with their current customers? Mm-hmm. Because if you aren't, what do you think I'm doing when I'm calling them? Your competition is asking about the problems they have with you. If you find out those problems, literally sell against yourself, 2 things happen. Number 1, you find another issue that a customer has. You provide a new value prop that you can now sell to other people, right? And you stop someone else from ganking the customer. Mm. They're having the problem. Go explore it. And that's part of that back end. You've got to constantly create value. I mean, I understand, like at the enterprise and sort of managed transportation level, I think people these days are too quick to implementation. So honestly, they have years of problems to solve. But if they really got it all done in the first place, year 2, it's hard to keep that customer because you have to keep showing that value. Mm-hmm.
God, I love that. Yeah. And that's so true. I mean, people's supply chains change just based on people's buying habits.
Yeah.
Like all the time. Like I think about one of the bigger clients we had when I was in LTL, and they literally transitioned from one of their biggest clients sending everything down to Laredo to one of their biggest clients built a friggin' different place in Arizona. And guess what? It changed their supply chain. It changed the way they moved freight. And I think, as the supply chain evolves, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about, how many sales did that company make, and cash in, cash out, inventory in, inventory out. Is there suppliers that they're building their inventory working properly? There's so much that goes into the supply chain other than just moving a truck.
Now, you actually, when I was prepping last night, and to Bella's point, it's the problem you don't hear about is the one they sign another contract with someone else over. Yeah. We hear about the things that are on fire, but it's the 6 before that one that added up to that one. That's why they left. They didn't leave for the one truck. They left for the 6 before that we didn't hear about, where things just kind of weren't, when somebody else was in their ear. Jared, on a lot of your posts, you talk about relationships. On a lot of brokers' posts, they talk about relationships. But here's the thing. Relationships take time.
Yeah.
And relationships take communication, right? And you can't be in a communicative relationship without identifying the other person's problems, without understanding them. And that's why it's a continued relationship. Don't hide under the rug for these things. Nothing's perfect. You want to be the one to find out. And therefore, you're constantly selling. Almost look at it like you got to resell your customer every couple of months, every couple of weeks, whatever. Better you than somebody else. Yeah. And by the way, if you keep doing that, they won't ever be in the habit of looking for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hey, the quarter's almost up. Instead of you coming back looking for more freight, it's like, hey, and I'm going to keep calling on Bella. Hey, Bella's coming back to fix our problems again.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone has a KPI that they monitor too. And if you're not asking what they're monitoring, their key performance indicators, if you're not asking those questions, I think although I think there's something to be said about getting and building personal relationships and understanding, okay, this cat loves the Cincinnati Bengals, or, I watched that Simpsons thing the other night and I can't get enough of it. But you've got to make sure that you're steering that ship properly enough to make sure, the Bengals need to have a chat, but you also need to make sure that you've got, enough in the fuel to keep, what log do I need to throw on this to make sure that the fire keeps going? Because they have to have a good balance.
That's something else that another post that I remember I commented on a while back, where you talked about the ability to listen. Because again, relationships don't mean much and I know if I was, whatever, I'm the guest, I was going to say I've probably done 85% of the talking, but anyway, but see, you're doing a good job of listening. So
there we go.
If you really want to get good at the value proposition and the differentiator game, you have to ask better questions and listen, because the differentiator is prescriptive. It is which lure can I use that will be different, and that only matters about what the person that you're talking to needs. That's why it's called a differentiator. And again, it's okay to just fish with something, get shot down by 1,000 people, then tomorrow use a different lever. You're not trying to find them all. You're trying to find the one. It picks up a lot more speed after that.
Yeah. And, to be honest, a lot of people too, they just struggle with knowing, okay, what is the right question to ask next, right? So we'll give out questions you could ask, but it's like, you have to understand if it's the right time for that question. You don't want to sound like a robot either, but you and Jared and Nick say it all the time. It's, you're only as good as the questions that you ask. If you're unsure what to even ask, like I said, look through some of those questions that maybe make sense to them. Because that does kill a lot of people's confidence. It's just like, all right, what am I supposed to be asking this person?
See, right there, though, that's the problem. They're worried about what they're supposed to be saying and asking. Just because they're putting a question mark at the end of it doesn't make it not a statement. Here's what they need to do. I need to ask questions until I understand this. It doesn't matter what question you're supposed to ask. I mean, as you get better at it, you understand what questions get you the answers quicker. And I'm a guy who believes in scripts, all right? But it's not about the script. It's about understanding the problem. Now, for somebody who ships twice a week, you're not going to have this. But if you're really into a relationship, and by the way, it's okay to start taking shipments from somebody and keep doing this. Don't talk again, we get the first shipment, we're like, peace out. So examine it by understanding the problem. And by understanding, what is the problem? Who does it impact? right? What is the exponential ripple effect of that problem? A late shipment is never an issue. It's what happens because of the late shipment, right? Other issues spring out.
Yeah.
My wife is. You hold on. Are you taking your wife on a sales call? I need to do this. If my wife was watching, I'm taking her on the next sale.
That's awesome. I love that taco.
I like it.
This is contract. This is so good. Yeah, my dad used to say, Nick, I thought this was always interesting. And as a kid, I didn't give a damn. I was like, I got this, Dad. I don't want to hear it. But my dad always used to say this like constantly. Like he would be like, you need to listen to understand, not listen to reply. And it's like, okay, sure, Dad, and you don't really think about it until you're 40. And then you're like, yeah, that was probably smart. But it's definitely, gaining attention when it comes to listening and understanding. And listening can go a long way, not only in just, not only in just what they're talking about, but I get so much from the tone of their voice, from the speed of their voice, from the pauses, I can tell if you're pissed off in about 2 seconds. I can tell if you're pissed. I can tell a lot about the tone of a voice, and so I think it's really important that you take listening to a three-dimensional aspect and understanding not only the person and the way they would think, but also just the sheer fact of what they're talking about.
Can you put up T. Harris's comment again real quick? So you mentioned Selling Inspired. The way that book came about was I was actually writing another book called The Investigators. And I don't know if I told you, but I was a private investigator for 20 years. Obviously, I'm not 100 years old, so there was some overlap. And this book, The Investigators, was going to be every sales book you've ever read with a slightly different approach on the investigation stage, the needs and discovery stage, where I was going to actually use real life investigative techniques to uncover the buyer's true buying motive. Because to this point right here, the questions aren't discrete, but answers sometimes are. Also, sometimes the people who are replying to you expect that you already know what they're talking about. And so they give you half answers. I've learned this by communicating with my wife. She'll start talking about something and I'm like, wait, just wait, Nick, you'll figure it out. Just smile and nod. You'll know okay, good. She won't give me the first 3 lines, I'm like, okay, I got it. I know what she's talking about now. When we were driving 8 weeks ago, she saw something and started talking about it. And now she's finishing the sentence. Okay, cool. But that's the way the shippers are. They just expect that they sort of pretend that you're in their kitchen all the time. And they're like, hey, it's, fold in the cheese and move on. And you're like, wait, what? I don't understand. So the movie Philadelphia, Denzel Washington, explained it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. Whenever I was in front of a contact, I always have notes, even if I'm using AI recorders. And when I was in person, if I had to draw a diagram to figure out what they were talking about, that's what was going to happen.
That's funny.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah. That's how I understand. It's how I learn something. Sometimes I'm visual. When not for nothing. If somebody's really that annoyed that you're asking questions about their problem, then they don't expect you to solve it anyway.
Right.
And they're going to be a problem. So move on to someone interested in that.
Just not a good customer for you. I agree. Nick, we're at that point. I really appreciate you for coming back on. How do people get in touch with you? Just maybe spend some time with you, and where can they get this amazing book, Selling Inspired?
You can find me at stridemotivation.com. There's links to all my social media, which is Stride Motivation. And you can also book a call if you want to talk about any of these things. Selling Inspired is actually free this week until Friday on Amazon for download. So if you got Kindle, tablet, or you can download the free Kindle app. And if you want like a paperback copy, it's, suck it up. It's $19 or hit me up for a signed one.
I recommend getting this copy here. You get maybe Nick will write you a little note in there, and something you can open every day. Just kind of get that motivation. And if you don't, I would recommend connecting with Nick on LinkedIn because he's posting every day.
Yeah,
just content you really need to kind of get your day going. It's nice to see your content too because it's kind of nice when you see someone going through something and you're like, I'm not the only one going through that. So you hit everything on the head, and I just love you, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Brokers don't have brokers don't have much experience. Yeah, RJ.
I can tell you right now, you're doing the right thing by asking questions. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Run real hard. Screw up a lot of things. I wrote a whole book about mine.
RJ, we'll talk next week, RJ. Good to see you. I hope you're doing okay. Nick, thanks again for being here, everyone. Enjoy your Wednesday. We'll talk soon.